Welcome back, CATIA class. We're going over problem 3-2, second problem. All right, so first make sure you're in the correct unit. So we are in millimeters. So once you have CATIA open, let's go ahead and close this window. Let's go to Start, Mechanical Design, Part Design. Okay, and I'm going to call this problem 3-2. And OK. Okay, so notice we are in the part workbench. I'm going to maximize this window. I'm going to maximize CATIA. There it is. All right, so let's check our units. So let's go to Tools, Options. We go to General, click the plus sign, go to Parameters and Measure, go to Units tab, go to Length, and pick millimeters. Again, we're going to be using millimeters and inches in this class. For this assignment, we'll go with millimeters, and OK. All right, so we're going to create a sketch on this plane. Doesn't matter which plane. I'll pick the second plane, YZ, to create our sketch. And now we are in the Sketcher workbench. I'm going to hold on to the wheel, move the mouse to pan, and I'm going to move my toolbars. All right. By the way, you may accidentally turn off one of your toolbars. It does happen. It happens to all of us, where you think this is in the way and you just close it off by clicking on the X. This is the sketch tools. Then you realize, hey, what happened to my sketch tools? Well, you can always right click on any icon, right click, and go to sketch tools. Notice there's no check mark. Anything with a check mark is loaded. Notice that a lot of this stuff is not loaded, and it'll just take up a lot of room in CATIA, so that's why these are turned off. But we do definitely need the sketch tools. Once I click on it, it'll add the check mark and load the tools bar, that toolbar. There it is, sketch tools. All right, I'll just dock it just like a boat. All right, so you don't have to do this. I'm gonna go ahead and move this over to the left. Same thing with the PDF file. There it is, just so I don't have to go back and forth. Okay, I hold on to the wheel to pan. So I'm just going to guesstimate the sketch. Okay, so I'll make this my origin at 0, 0. So I'm just going to guesstimate about 72 and then click here and start drawing. I'm going to go around and create the periphery of this part. All right, so we're going to go to Profile. And I'm just going to move my cursor. Notice this is 0, 0. And as I move across, I want to get somewhere around 72, something close enough. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, that's close enough to 72. I'm going to click. And I'm going to start creating my sketch. So this is at around 90, right? So this is at around 90. So I'm going to go till I see a 90. Something close to 90. There it is. Close enough. Click. And then in your toolbars, you're going to see your horizontal and vertical coordinates, the length, the angle of what you currently have. You can see as I move it, it's readjusting to match the location of the endpoints and the angle of the line. Then I'm going to go with, hey, I want a tangent arc. So we are going to create quite a few arcs. So I want to create a tangent arc. Okay, I don't want a right angle, or I should say a 90-degree arc. So let me get away from that 90-degree. And I'm just going to guesstimate the angle and click. And then I want to stay tangent. I want the tangent to light up. See how you have the double lines? So that tells me we're tangent. If it doesn't come out tangent, we can always come back and add the tangent later. Okay, and I'm just going to click. Now I want to create the arc, this arc. So click on tangent arc. There it is. I'm trying to get this to go vertical. There it is. The blue dotted line, I want it to go vertical. Click, so then I can create a, oh, it didn't come out horizontal. That's okay. So it's not coming out horizontal and tangent. That's okay. I'll go ahead and create a horizontal without the tangency. So there's no tangency here. That's okay. I was off on my angle. I'll come back and fix it. Okay, so I'm going to click, create another arc. And again, I'm just guessing on the size of the arc for now. Click, go vertical, go horizontal, and do another arc, tangent. I'm supposed to go all the way to the vertical, right? So go all the way to the vertical axis. Click, go vertical, click. Let's go with another arc. Click. Now these are supposed to line up with each other. So I'm going to go till it, see how it wants to create a relationship. So I'm going to click and it's going to create a relationship between these two. Click. And then we got a vertical and then an arc. Vertical and then an arc. And it's not going to be quite exactly what I want, but we can always go back in and fix it. And click. And there it is. It stopped because it's a closed profile. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just click in space or hit escape on the keyboard to deselect. Anytime you select something, it turns orange. Click in space to deselect. All right, so we need to go in and fix a few things. So by having these turned on, notice how these are orange. It automatically generates constraints like tangency, horizontal, vertical, etc. Coincidence. So it auto-generated these constraints. So this endpoint lines up with this line, which that's what we want. So by having these turned on, it auto-generates constraints and in some cases dimensions. Okay, let me click in space to deselect. Okay, so things I need to fix. So I'm going to hold on to the wheel to pan. I can always zoom in and out manually if I want with the magnifying glass. I can always do a zoom fit all. Zoom in. Okay, let me get this out of the way. All right, so we're missing tangency. So we need tangency at the arc with respect to this line. It did generate it here, as you can see, and here we have the tangency. If we open up the CATIA tree, we can see a bunch of tangencies. And something I haven't mentioned yet, I will in the lecture notes, is sometimes you'll accidentally click on the white branch and things will go dark. CATIA thinks you're trying to pan the or zoom in and out on the tree. So if you accidentally click on one of the white branches and it goes into tree mode, into the CATIA tree mode, to exit you can either click back on the white branches of the tree or click on this white axis. If you click on it, it'll exit that CATIA mode or CATIA tree mode. All right, so we're out of it. If we click back on this white axis, we're back in tree mode. Okay, or you can always click on the white branch to exit, and now we're back in model mode. All right, so I'm going to roll the wheel. If you roll the wheel, you can move the tree up and down just by rolling the wheel. Okay, so I'm going to add a tangency constraint, and you'll see it load in the tree. Okay, so I'm going to hold the control key on the keyboard, select the horizontal, select the arc. Then I'm going to go to relationship constraints. So let's add a relationship between these two elements. And we want tangency. You'll see the tangent light up or appear, and it will also load in the tree. And hit OK. All right, so we also need a tangency with these two. So I'll select the arc, hold on to the control key, the horizontal, and add a tangency. There it is, and it loads it into the tree, and okay. All right, so now we can throw in some dimensions. And as we throw in dimensions, it's going to appear as offsets in the tree. All right, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You can always use the magnifying glass or hold the wheel to pan. All right, so let's throw in the radius 12. So we have a radius or radii of 12, typical. So anytime you see TYP, that means typical. So it's radius of 12 for all the arcs, unless otherwise specified. Okay, so radius of 12. So let's throw in radius of 12. For each arc, we can go double click, change it to 12, enter. So I can do it manually one at a time and type in 12 for each one. But you can also make them equal to each other. Okay, so if I go to this one, go back to 12, double click. I can right click inside and it'll give me a formula, edit formula. I can say, hey, edit formula. And you can make it equal to the first radius. So if I click on this one, it'll make it equal. And hit OK. And notice how it's grayed out. So this 12, or this radius here, is now tied to this one. And you can tell by this little fx, it tells us there's an equation or a link to another dimension or equation or formula. Hit OK. So if this ever changes, so if I change this to 15, for example, the other one will change to 15. As you can see, it also changed to 15. Change it back to 12. Okay, let's do the same thing with the others. I'll create a dimensional constraint. Double click on it. Right click inside this blue area, right click, go to edit formula. Pick the first dimension. You can always pick the second one too. I'm just going to stay consistent and pick the first one. And notice how now it's linked to that first radius. You can also do math here. You can say plus or times. So this is, think of it as a formula. Hit OK. There it is. So it's also 12 and has the little fx. So you can always delete this link to the first one. Same thing with this one. You can always delete the link of the dimension to this first one. Okay, so let's go ahead and throw in some other ones. Double click, right click, edit formula, link it to the first one. There it is. It tells us it's linked. Hit OK, turns it to 12. It's grayed out because it's linked to the first one. Hit OK. Throw in another radius. Double click, right click. And by the way, you could have done this all at the same time. Could have done that to save time. All right, so that's the last one of the arcs. Link it to the first one and OK. And notice it's grayed out because it's linked and OK. All right, so let's throw in a few more dimensions. Okay, let's throw in the 24, 35, 24. 24. 35. Ooh, I'm missing a vertical here, so I'll have to come back and fix that. And 24. Okay, so I'm missing a vertical on this one. So I need to go in, select it. This lights up because it knows something has been selected. And now I can give it a vertical relationship or constraint, vertical constraint, and hit OK. And there's the V. All right, so now let's throw in a 60 and 75. Actually, I'll save the 75 for last. There's something I have to do with that. Okay, so let's go with 60 first. Okay, let's throw in the 72. Notice the 72 goes to the center of the arc. And the arc and the circle are concentric. They share the same center point. So let's throw in the 72. To the center of the arc. Oh, didn't like something. So something's not right. So it looks like I over-constrained it. I'm going to delete this one. Yes, so actually I have too many dimensions on this drawing. I didn't realize that. Okay, so the 72 is fighting the 60 and the 12. 60 plus 12 is 72. All right, so one of them has to go. So the 72 has to go. Either I can delete it and everything will go back to green and white. Or I can say, you know what? I'm going to keep the 72 as a reference. Even though the 72 with the yellow swirl is telling me it's fighting the 12 and the 60, which add up to 72. So that adds redundancy. It's like double dimensioning. So I'm just going to simply double click on the 72 and turn it into a reference dimension. So anytime an inspector or machinist sees a dimension in parentheses, it means reference. Notice it added the parentheses. Hit OK. So that's just a sanity check. Yep, it is 72. But we don't use this number to inspect or to machine to. We're going to use the 12 and the 60 in this case. All right, so it's turning green. Obviously, we still have white elements. So if you were to pull on it, see, it's telling us we're missing dimensions. We're free to move it. So we're missing some dimensions. All right, let's throw in that 90. Now the 90 is to this intersection point. So we have this line, and we have this line, this horizontal and this vertical. And if we were to extend it, this would be the intersection point for that line, that slope, and that horizontal. Okay, so let's see if I can get a CATIA to give me that intersection point. So let's throw in that dimension from the vertical. And let's see if I can get it to give me that intersection point. If it doesn't, I'm going to have to manually go in there. And so I can get that intersection point, even though I'm trying to, let me zoom in a little bit. I'm trying to track it, but it's not tracking. So let me hit escape. All right, so we do have intersect. If I go to drop down here, my mistake. If I go to point, don't need to go to the drop down. I can go straight to point. And I'm gonna ride this slope here, ride the horizontal, and it should, there it is. See how it's tracking? You see the blue lines tracking? It's gonna give me that intersection point. So I'm gonna click, and it adds a point. Now here's the problem with the point. Notice how it's a solid point. How do I know it's solid? Because it appears as crosshairs. Let me move this 12 out of the way. So we haven't talked about this yet, but there's construction elements and there's visible object lines or points. Okay, we haven't talked about this yet. I will mention it in the lecture notes. So I need to take this point and change it to a construction point. And one way to do that is by using this command. Okay, so if I click on this point and say, hey, I want it to be a construction point. Notice it turns it into a dot. And I'm going to click in space to deselect. Okay, so now let's throw in that dimension to that point. And let's type in 90. There it is, 90. Notice when I created that point, it generated the coincidence. So that point is coincident to this line. It means it lines up with that slope. And the point also lines up with the horizontal. So that's the reason for these rings here, those coincidences. All right. So let's do the same thing at the top. We're going to create a point. And I'm going to hover over the horizontal, hover over the slope, and then wait for it to track. And there it is. Oh, it's tracking. There it is. Both lines light up. The blue lines telling me it's tracking the horizontal and the slope line, and click, and there's the point. Notice it adds coincidence constraints to the horizontal and the slope line. Okay, so now we can add that dimension of 75 from this vertical to that point and change it to 75 and enter. I want you to notice that anytime you use the construction command, when you turn it on, it stays on. So any new lines you create, if I was to create a new line, notice it comes out as a construction line. Why? Because I have construction on. So if you wanted to turn this line into a solid, you can always click it, turn it into an object line. Select it, click on it, it turns it into a construction. So a construction line is not part of your final sketch. It's just a guide or geometry assisting you to create the final geometry that you want. Just like that point. This point is not a solid point. It's a construction point. It's just to help us dimension. It's not part of the final sketch. All right, so let me delete this line. I can right click delete or hit delete on the keyboard. So the thing is, you're going to forget to turn this back on. Let's say I forgot, I'm going to leave it off. Okay, so I'm going to leave it off, or leave it on, I should say. So all right, let's do the rectangle now. All right, let's do the rectangle. So we can use the rectangle command. If you don't say the rectangle command, go to profile, go to the downward arrow. If elongated hole was the last command you use, most likely it'll load up the elongated hole command instead of the rectangle. So you have to go to the drop down. Now pick rectangle. We'll just guesstimate its location. Notice how it's trying to constrain itself. If I zoom in, I'm just going to zoom in. By zooming in, it avoids creating constraints. So here it is, I'm creating my rectangle, but I have construction on. Notice how it came out as construction lines. Click in space. So I want to take these lines, I'm going to hold on to the control key and turn them into solid visible object lines. So I'm going to turn them back to visible object lines and then click in space to deselect. All right, so we have dimensions for the rectangle. This is 10. Enter. We have a length of 66. Enter. Oh, I just realized something is not right with this dimension. I'll come back and fix it. All right. Now it's not obvious, but see this center line? This center line is supposed to be right in between these two horizontal lines. Okay, so I'm going to throw in a line. So we can click on line command, and notice I can pick the midpoint. Anytime you see that solid circle, it lets me know it's picking an endpoint or a midpoint. So I'm going to pick a midpoint. Same thing with this one. See the solid blue circle, click. And then I'm going to turn it into a construction element. It's not part of the final sketch. It's just to help us locate geometry or position or create other geometry. Click in space to deselect. Okay, so I want this line to be right in between these two horizontal lines. Notice right now it's free to move. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pre-select. So let me first click out in space or hit escape on the keyboard. hold on to the control key. I'm going to select the horizontal lines first. And then the center line, the one that's in the middle of the two, selected last. Then I'm going to put a relationship constraint of symmetry. Watch when I click symmetry, this horizontal line is going to line up right in the middle of the first two lines. 3, 2, 1. There it is. It lines up. And hit OK. So now we have the symmetry symbol. I know it's hard to see, but we have a line and two like half spheres or circles on either side. So that is symmetry. There it is, symmetry. Symmetry, and it's also there. It's hard to see, but it's right there. So it's telling us we have symmetry between the two horizontals and the construction line. Okay, so now it's not obvious, but this line lines up with the center of the arc and the circle. Same thing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this line, hold on to the control key, pick this center point or this one. It doesn't matter. And put a coincidence constraint. 3, 2, 1, coincidence. And notice how it lines up. And OK. All right, so I thought the 666 was a little too long, but actually it is correct. I thought it was a typo, but it's actually correct. All right, it does look right. OK, so I'm going to move on to the circles now. So we have two circles. So 2x tells us that there's two of them. Diameter 11. So let's draw in our circle. Notice I forgot to deactivate the construction option. So I need to turn it into a solid. Then click in space. There it is. Pick the other circle. Or create another circle, my mistake. All right, so now we can throw in our diameters of 11 and enter. And there it is. Everything is good. If for some reason it turns magenta on you, that means you have too many constraints. Look to the tree. Anything with the swirl, delete it. And try and backtrack. If you find yourself going in circles trying to figure out what's wrong, I suggest you start over again. Because if you go in circles, you're trying to understand what's wrong between the relationships. It really takes experience. Somebody with a lot of experience, over 5 years experience of using the software to locate the mistake or the clashing between the constraints. So if you find yourself going in circles, just start over again. You'll be faster the second time around. All right, let me maximize CATIA. All right, so let's do a tool sketch analysis for a sanity check. Everything says closed. There are 4 profiles, 2 circles, rectangular slot, and the main profile. Everything's closed. Everything's good. Now, let me show you a common mistake. Let's say these dots, intersection points, were shown as solids. So I'm changing these into solid points. You can see the crosshair. So now these are solid. If I was to exit the sketch and try and create a pad, so here's the pad command. Let me collapse this. I'm going to create a pad. It's telling me, hey, there's something wrong with your sketch. So let's say, hey, let's try it anyway. See if it gives me the pad. Hit OK. And it doesn't like the sketch. Say, nope, something's wrong with your sketch. Go back and fix it. Okay, so I'm going to cancel this pad. I can double click on the sketch either directly or from the tree. Either way, just double click. So do a tool sketch analysis. Notice the points is like, hey, you have these isolated points. So you can either select them and delete them if you don't want them. But in our case, we do want them for dimensioning. So what we can do is instead change them to construction. So I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to take this point, construction, see how it removes it off the list. Go to the next point, which is this one. Or my mistake, that one. We did the first one already. Now we're doing the second one. And change it to a construction element. It'll turn into a dot, and it removes it off the list, and we're good now. So now when we exit the sketch, I can now do a pad. Okay, so this is just a sanity check. So we're actually done with the sketch, but just as a sanity check, I'm going to turn it into a solid. Hit OK. And there's our part. Okay, so anytime you create a solid, we want it in part bodies. I've mentioned before geometric sets. A geometric set, if I insert a geometric set, I'll just let it auto rename. Geometric sets, which we don't cover in this class, are for non-solids like planes, points, splines out in space, surfaces. Okay, so typically geosets are for non-solids. Part bodies are for solids. So we don't need this geoset, so I can just right click and delete. All right, so just to practice pan, I hold on to the wheel, right, to pan. If I want to zoom in and out, I'm holding onto the wheel. Tap the right button, just tap it, but hold on to the wheel. Move the mouse up and down, and we can zoom in and out. We can always use the zoom in magnifying glass here. So once again, hold on to the wheel to pan. Hold the wheel, tap the right button to zoom in and out. If you hold the wheel and the right button, now you can rotate. Pan. It's going to rotate about an imaginary point in the middle of your screen. So if I go to rotate again, wheel, right button, hold them both. It's going to rotate it about an imaginary point in the middle of the screen. If you don't want that, let's say you want to rotate about this point here on the arc at that tangent point. Click the wheel once and it'll center this point in the middle of the screen. Click it. Notice how it moved the part and center that point. So now when I rotate, hold on the wheel, hold on to the wheel and the right button, it'll rotate it about that point. Let's say I go to this corner here, click it with the wheel. So I'm going to click the wheel and release the wheel. It centers that point in the middle of the screen. So now when I rotate, hold on to the wheel, right button, it rotates about that point that was centered to the screen. All right, so we can also do, hey, show me isometric view, show me front view, show me top view, bottom view, show me isometric view. Okay, so we're done. So now let's go ahead and save this. We're going to go File, Save, or we can hit Save here. So File, Save. Save it onto your flash drive, your desktop. I'm just going to save it to my flash drive. So I already have a CAD31 folder, Chapter 3. I actually already have it saved from a previous lecture. I named it 3.2 on one of my old lectures from a few years back. But here I'll call it problem 3-2 and I'll save it. And we're done. So we can now go ahead and close it. If you ever want to open the last file you had open, you can always go to File, Open, or it'll remember the last file you opened. Here it is, 3-2. All right, so that's the end of problem 3-2. See you in the next one.